The Bosman Ruling is the single biggest influencing factor in modern football history. It changed the course of football. The players had more influence in dictating where and for whom they wanted to play. The contracts signed by players had meaning after the Bosman Ruling. It was a real game-changing moment in football history. Let's take a deep dive into the Bosman Ruling and how it changed the course of the game. Also, what if the Bosman Ruling never happened? What is Bosman Ruling? The story's hero is Jean-Marc Bosman. Yep, the Bosman Ruling derives its name directly from a player who made the first free transfer switch. In 1990, Bosman was playing for the Belgian side Royal Football Club de Liege. After his contract expired, he wanted to move to Dunkirk in the French league. As was the norm back then, clubs needed to agree to a certain fee for the player to make the switch, even if the player's contract had expired. Dunkirk refused to meet the RFC Liege's valuation of the player, resulting in the transfer breaking down. To add insult to injury, Bosman, who was not even viewed as a first-team player by now in RFC Liege, had his wages cut down by a staggering 70%. Citing FIFA's Article 17, Bosman sued the European Court of Justice against forced labor and restraint of trade and demanded his free will as to where he wanted to play once his contract expired. The court ruled in favor of Jean-Marc Bosman, who became the first player in football history to move to a club on a free transfer. Before the ruling, every club that wanted to recruit a player had to pay a certain transfer fee to the player's previous club, even if his contract expired. In England, they even set up a tribunal for the clubs to solve disputes and decide on a favorable transfer fee for the clubs involved. The impact of the Bosman Ruling on football. The ruling came into effect in 1995, and Edgar Davids was the first high-profile move on a free transfer when he moved to AC Milan from Ajax. Another high-profile case was that of Steve McManaman, who moved to Real Madrid from Liverpool in 1999. Liverpool were shortchanged in that move because they couldn't give McManaman the wages Real Madrid offered, making him the highest-paid British player of all time. Another significant impact of the Bosman Ruling was that the players could negotiate with another club with 6 months remaining on their contracts. That would give them ample time to select or choose their next destination. Players were free to negotiate with other clubs without the current club's interference. The players now had equal, if not more, power than the club they represented. With the clubs unable to demand a certain transfer fee when their contracts expired, players were free to negotiate without having to worry about their current club pulling the plug on the transfer. As free agents, the player also had the freedom to train with whichever club they liked. Of course, the club would first permit them to train with them, but it was also a good feature of being a free agent. The Bosman Ruling also removed the requirement of a minimum number of EU players in a playing squad. This had a significant impact because it made the squads more diverse. Otherwise, they would have become quite nationally homogeneous. What if the Bosman Ruling never happened? This is where the bucks stop. The most significant what if in football history, because this topic is related to the footballers themselves. Bosman Ruling was a watershed moment in football history, and we will tell you why exactly by telling you how the world of football would have looked without the Bosman Ruling. Transfer fees. We have already discussed this point, but it is so significant that we must revisit it. Teams currently buy and sell players, and this has been a norm since decades. It is the only feasible way for players to transfer from one club to the other, or was the only feasible way before the Bosman Ruling. The clubs would still get transfer fees had a player from their club departed at the expiration of their contracts. Can you imagine Kylian Mbappe joining Real Madrid on a free transfer without the Bosman Ruling? If there were no Bosman rules, then Madrid would still have had to pay close to 50 to 100 million euros to PSG and let Kylian join them. Even a token transfer fee would have been in the millions. We can say that with complete confidence that there would be way fewer transfers in the current time as well had there been no Bosman transfer. Club power. One of the best things Bosman Ruling did was give the players power. Before 1995, players were at the mercy of the clubs they played for. If the demand for the player was not met by the other clubs, the transfer simply didn't go through. Clubs held all the power in that regard. Bosman Ruling gave the players freedom. Signing for a club or departing after expiration of contract is now solely dependent on the player's choice. We already saw how RFC Liege reduced Jean-Marc Bosman's wages because the French club refused to meet the transfer demand. Clubs had too much power, and that power also meant that players were sometimes treated worse than daily laborers. There are so many examples in current times too when a player refuses to transfer from one club to the other. The primary club would make the player train with reserves or dock their wages if they denied a transfer to the other clubs. Even with players having power, they still have to go through these situations. Imagine if Bosman never happened. What would be the plight of the players? Smaller clubs in trouble. We see so many times that players from a top-tier club joining clubs in the tier below on a free transfer, and that is because the clubs in tiers below than the first tier would struggle to come up with a transfer fee for players in Elite League, so their only chances of signing those players is on a free transfer, where they can just negotiate wages with them and the deal is eventually done. Bosman Ruling allowed that to happen. Otherwise, there would be a huge gap between bigger and smaller clubs. As if it isn't the case currently anyway. But the gap would have been bigger. Just take Jack Wilshere for example. He joined Bournemouth, who were in the Championship on a free transfer. Sometimes players just want regular football and smaller clubs will give that opportunity to fringe players at top clubs. Without Bosman, would that have been possible? We don't think so. Youth development. Not everything would have been negative had Bosman Ruling never took place. Youth academies around the world would have benefited the most without the Bosman Rule. The clubs that need to spend will always spend, but it is also unwise to spend money just for the sake of spending. When we talked about Mbappe, we told you how he went on a free transfer to Real Madrid. But there is a good chance that had the Bosman Ruling not come around, Madrid would have refused to pay PSG any fee for the Frenchman. They would have rather promoted a junior player then. And that is where this point stands. In order to avoid paying unnecessary fees to other clubs, the clubs would then rather look inwards than outwards. Promoting someone from the academy would cost nothing than to buy a 20 to 30 million player. It is cost effective, and also it attracts promising young talents to the club, who regularly give the youths a chance. Promoting youth graduates into the first team would also increase significant investment in the grassroots of that particular club, and that in turn would benefit the country, because the more young players make it through, the more chances of them representing their countries in official UEFA and FIFA competitions. It would have been a win-win situation. It would have been one of the few positives of the Bosman Ruling. But the fact is that the Bosman Ruling did happen. And good that it happened, because it gave players some power to decide where their future lies. Before we end the video, we would like to ask you about your opinion whether the Bosman Ruling was right or wrong. Where do you guys stand on this subject? Do let us know. Cheers!